Cold metal touched Wu Jin's back as his eyes opened slowly, and the bright white lights above made him blink hard several times before he could see clearly, and his head felt heavy like someone had hit him with a hammer, while strange sounds filled the air around him, like clicking and buzzing that he had never heard before in his life. And when he tried to move his arms, he found thick metal bands holding them tight against a table that felt too smooth to be from Earth. The ceiling above him looked wrong, with patterns that hurt his eyes to follow and strange symbols that moved like they were alive and breathing. And when he turned his head to the left, he saw something that made his blood run cold, because there was another person on a table just like his, and it was Hana from his exploration team, and she was not moving at all, with wires connected to her head and arms, while machines around her made soft beeping sounds. Wu Jin had been a soldier for 10 years before joining the deep space exploration mission, and he knew how to stay calm when things went bad. But seeing Hana like that made anger rise in his chest like fire, and he pulled against the metal bands that held him down, but they did not move even a little bit, and that was when he heard the clicking sounds get louder and closer. 3 creatures walked into his view, and they were nothing like anything he had seen in movies or books, because they stood on 2 legs like humans, but their skin looked like hard plastic that shined under the lights, and they had 4 arms each that moved in ways that made him feel sick to watch. And their heads were too big, with eyes that looked like black mirrors that reflected everything but showed nothing of what they were thinking. The tallest one had markings on its chest that looked important, and it moved closer to Wu Jin while holding a device that looked like a metal stick with lights on the end. And when it spoke, the words came from a box on the wall that turned the clicking sounds into words he could understand, even though the voice sounded flat and cold like a machine. The creature said that humans were interesting specimens, and that their bodies were stronger than expected, and that they would make good soldiers for the great war that was coming. And Wu Jin felt his stomach drop, because he understood that these things had taken his team not by accident but on purpose, and they wanted to use humans as weapons in some fight he knew nothing about. The creature with the stick touched it to Wu Jin's arm, and pain shot through his whole body like lightning, and he bit his teeth together hard to keep from screaming, because he would not give these things the satisfaction of hearing him cry out. And after the pain stopped, the creature made clicking sounds to the others that the translation box did not turn into words. More creatures came into the room, and they all looked at Wu Jin like he was a bug under a microscope. And they talked among themselves about human pain responses and muscle density and bone strength, and how humans seemed to handle stress better than other species they had tested, and Wu Jin realized with growing horror that they had done this before to other people from other worlds. One of the creatures pulled out a clear tube filled with green liquid and pushed it into a machine next to Wu Jin's table, and the machine hummed to life, and he felt something cold enter his arm through a needle he had not seen them put in, and immediately his vision became blurry, and his thoughts felt like they were moving through thick mud, but he fought against it with everything he had. Through the fog in his mind, Wu Jin heard them talking about how humans fought the sedative longer than expected, and how their brain patterns stayed active even when their bodies should have been completely relaxed. And he stored this information away in the part of his mind that was still clear, because it might be important later if he got the chance to escape. The green liquid made time feel strange, and sometimes Wu Jin thought hours had passed. But then he would hear the same clicking conversation happen again like it was the first time, and he began to understand that they were running tests on him over and over while he drifted in and out of consciousness, and each time he woke up there were new marks on his skin and new aches in his muscles. During one of his clear moments he saw that Hana was awake on her table and looking at him with fear in her eyes, but also with determination that reminded him why she had been chosen for the exploration mission, and he tried to move his mouth to tell her that they would get out of this. But no sound came out, because the green liquid had made his throat feel like it was full of cotton. The creatures seemed very interested in how humans responded to different types of fear, and they would show Wu Jin images on a screen that appeared above his head, and the images were of Earth being attacked by ships that looked like the place he was trapped in now, and they watched his heart rate and brain activity while he saw his home world burning and people running in the streets. But Wu Jin had been trained to control his emotions in combat situations, and instead of feeling afraid, he began to feel something much more dangerous, which was cold, calculating anger, and he started to memorize everything he could see about the room and the creatures and their equipment and their routines, because anger without a plan was useless, but anger with a plan could move mountains. The creatures did not seem to understand that they were not just studying a human specimen, but they were creating something that would become very dangerous to them, and Wu Jin began to notice patterns in their behavior and weaknesses in their setup that his military training helped him identify, even while his body was held down by their machines. He saw that they always approached from the same angles, and that their movements were predictable, like they followed programming instead of thinking for themselves. And he noticed that their equipment had no backup systems, which meant that if one thing failed, the whole system might stop working. And most importantly, he saw that they had no idea that humans were capable of patience and planning, even under the worst conditions. The tall creature with the markings came back with more devices and began to explain to the others about the next phase of testing and how they would need to see how humans performed under combat stress. And Wu Jin felt a smile try to form on his numb lips because these creatures had no idea what they were about to unleash as the green liquid began to wear off again. Wu Jin started to flex his muscles in tiny movements that the creatures could not see, and he began to work on loosening the restraints that held him down, because he had learned in his military training that even the strongest bonds had weak points if you knew how to find them, and he was very good at finding weak points in his enemies. 3 days of watching and waiting had taught Wu Jin everything he needed to know about his captors and their routines, and when the tall creature with the markings approached his table for what it thought was another routine procedure, Wu Jin was ready, and the moment the creature reached for the control panel that would release more green liquid into his system, he twisted his right arm in a way that human joints could move, but alien joints could not. The metal restraint that had seemed so strong broke with a sharp crack that echoed through the room. And before the creature could make a sound, Wu Jin grabbed its neck with his free hand and squeezed until he heard the clicking sounds turn into something like gasping, and the creature's 4 arms flailed wildly as it tried to reach the alarm button. But Wu Jin had studied the reach of those arms for 3 days, and he knew exactly how to stay just outside their range. The other 2 creatures in the room froze for a moment like their programming had not prepared them for this situation, and that moment of hesitation was all Wu Jin needed to reach across with his free arm and grab a metal tool that looked like a scalpel and drive it deep into the joint where the tall creature's neck met its shoulder, and green liquid that was not the same as the sedative spurted out and covered his hand. Hana's eyes were wide as she watched Wu Jin break his other restraints and roll off the table while the wounded creature fell backward and made terrible clicking sounds that the translation box could not turn into words. And the 2 remaining creatures finally started moving toward the alarm panel, but Wu Jin was already between them and the wall-fighting creatures. With 4 arms was different from fighting humans. But Wu Jin had trained in combat against multiple opponents, and he knew that more arms meant more ways to get tangled up and confused. And when the first creature swung all 4 arms at him, he ducked low and swept its legs in a move that sent it crashing into the equipment next to Hana's table, and sparks flew from broken machines. The second creature was smarter and tried to back toward the door while reaching for something that looked like a weapon on its belt. But Wu Jin moved faster than it expected and grabbed 2 of its arms and twisted them behind its back in a hold that would have dislocated human shoulders and apparently worked just as well on alien joints because the creature made a high clicking sound that might have been screaming. Hana was trying to say something, but her voice was weak from the sedatives, so Wu Jin focused on breaking her restraints while keeping the creature he was holding as a shield against anything else that might come through the door. And when Hana was free, she stumbled off her table and pointed to a wall panel that was flashing red lights. The translation box was making announcement sounds about security breach and lockdown procedures. But Wu Jin noticed that the creatures seemed to panic when their technology started talking to them instead of the other way around, and he realized that these beings were so dependent on their machines that they could not function. When the machines were not working properly, Hana grabbed his arm and whispered that she had been awake longer than he thought and had been watching the creatures work, and she had figured out that their equipment was connected through a central system that controlled everything in the facility. And if they could get to the main control room, they might be able to free the other humans she had seen being brought in. The creature Wu Jin was holding tried to break free, but he tightened his grip and used it as a living key card to open the door that led deeper into the facility, and the corridor outside was filled with the same white light and strange patterns that hurt to look at directly. But now he was moving instead of lying helpless. And everything looked different when you were hunting. Instead of being hunted, alarms were blaring throughout the facility, and Wu Jin could hear clicking sounds coming from multiple directions, which meant more creatures were coming. But he also heard something else that made his heart jump with hope, and that was a human voice calling out from somewhere ahead and to the right. And Hana confirmed that she recognized the voice as Tai Ho from their exploration team. They moved quickly through corridors that were designed for creatures taller than humans, which meant there were plenty of places to take cover and set up ambushes, and Wu Jin's military training kicked in completely as he began to think of the facility not as a prison, but as a battlefield where he had the advantage of knowing human tactics, while his enemies only understood their own rigid procedures. The creature he was dragging started making more noise, so Wu Jin found a pressure point on its neck that made it go quiet. And Hana looked at him with an expression that was part impressed and part worried, but he did not have time to explain that sometimes survival required doing things that felt wrong, because the alternative was death or worse. They found Taeho in a room that was full of machinery that hummed with power, and he was strapped to a table that was connected to devices that were scanning his brain while he was awake and aware, and when he saw them, his face showed relief and anger at the same time, and he told them quickly that he had been listening to the creatures talk about their plans for humanity. Taeho explained while Wu Jin worked on his restraints that the facility was not just a laboratory, but a staging area for a massive invasion fleet that was planning to attack Earth and other human colonies, and the creatures had been studying humans to understand their weaknesses before the attack began, but they had made a serious mistake in their research. The mistake was that they had only studied humans under controlled laboratory conditions, and they had never seen what humans could do when they were free to fight back and use their creativity and adaptability. And Taeho had heard them discussing how human responses to stress were much different from what their computer models had predicted. Hana was working on understanding the control systems while the men talked, and she discovered that the creatures had been so confident in their technology that they had not prepared for the possibility that their test subjects might escape and fight back, and their security systems were designed to keep people in, but not to stop people who were moving freely through the facility. Wu Jin realized that they had a chance to do more than just escape, and they could turn this facility into a warning system for Earth if they could figure out how to send a message, and they could also gather intelligence about the invasion plans that might help humanity prepare for the attack that was coming. But first they needed to stay alive and free the other humans who were trapped in the facility. And Wu Jin began to form a plan that would use everything he knew about guerrilla warfare and asymmetric combat to turn the aliens' own facility into a trap for them instead of a trap for humans. The clicking sounds in the corridors were getting closer, and Wu Jin knew that soon they would have to fight their way to freedom. But he was no longer afraid because he was no longer alone, and he was no longer helpless, and these creatures were about to learn that humans were much more dangerous when they were angry than when they were scared. The control room became their fortress, and Tejo's engineering skills proved more valuable than any weapon because within an hour he had figured out how to redirect the facility's power grid and turn their own security systems against them. And the first group of alien guards that came looking for the escaped humans found themselves trapped in a corridor when the doors locked automatically and the lights went out. Wu Jin had positioned himself near the main entrance with improvised weapons made from medical equipment. And when the aliens tried to cut through the sealed doors with their energy tools, he used the facility's own atmospheric controls to fill that section with a gas that Hana had identified as harmless to humans, but toxic to the alien respiratory systems. The creatures had built their facility to be perfect for containing and studying other species, but they had never considered what would happen if those same species gained control of the systems and began using the technology creatively instead of just being victims of it. And Wu Jin realized that this was the key difference between humans and these aliens. The aliens thought in straight lines and followed procedures that their technology told them to follow, but humans could think around corners and find solutions that did not exist in any manual, and when the main group of security forces tried to enter through the ventilation system, Tejo had already rigged those passages with electrical feedback that sent them scrambling back to safety. Hana made a discovery that changed everything when she accessed the alien computer networks and found detailed files about dozens of other species that had been captured and studied and then wiped out when the aliens decided they were not useful, and she realized that humanity was just the latest in a long line of civilizations that these creatures had destroyed. But the files also showed something else that filled her with hope, and that was evidence that no other species had ever fought back the way humans were fighting back, and all the previous victims had either surrendered immediately or died quickly without adapting to their situation, and humans were the first to turn a research facility into a battlefield. The alien commander that Hana identified as Mordan sent message after message, demanding that the humans surrender and return to their testing chambers, and each message promised that they would not be harmed if they cooperated, but Wu Jin had seen too much to believe any promises from creatures who viewed other species as laboratory animals. Instead of surrendering, Wu Jin began hunting, and he used the facility's own sensor network to track the movements of alien personnel. And then he would appear in corridors where they did not expect him and strike fast and disappear before reinforcements could arrive, and each attack taught him more about alien physiology and psychology. The creatures were physically strong, and their exoskeletons could stop most improvised weapons, but Wu Jin discovered that they had vulnerable joints where their armor plates connected, and that their compound eyes could not track fast, erratic movements very well, and most importantly, they seemed to have no experience with opponents who used deception and misdirection. Tejo rigged the facility's communication system so that false reports were sent to the alien fleet telling them that everything was normal and the research was proceeding as planned, and this bought them time to prepare for the larger battle that they all knew was coming when the aliens realized what had really happened. Meanwhile, Hana used her scientific training to analyze everything they could learn about alien technology and biology, and she made weapons from medical scanners and turned diagnostic equipment into explosive devices and created traps using the aliens' own gravitational manipulation tools that could crush anything caught in their field. The facility's other human prisoners were freed one by one, and each rescue operation became easier because Wu Jin was learning to think like an alien commander and predict where they would place their guards and what tactics they would use. And every time he was right, it proved that humans could outthink these creatures despite their advanced technology. By the end of the first week, the facility had become a maze of deadly surprises where every corridor might contain a trap and every room might hide a human fighter, and the aliens found themselves afraid to move through their own base without large groups of guards, and even then, they were not safe. The breakthrough came when Hana discovered that the aliens communicated with their home fleet through a quantum entanglement system that could not be blocked or intercepted, but could be accessed if you knew the right codes. And she had learned those codes by watching the alien technicians work for days. Wu Jin realized that they now had the ability to send a warning to Earth and other human colonies about the coming invasion, and they could also send detailed information about alien weaknesses and technology that would help humanity prepare for the war that was coming, whether they won this battle or not. But first they needed to make sure the aliens understood that humans were not going to be easy victims, and Wu Jin planned an operation that would send a message that would reach every alien ship in the fleet and every alien commander who thought humans were just another primitive species to be conquered and enslaved. The plan was dangerous and would probably get them all killed, but it would also prove to the galaxy that humanity was not going to go quietly into extinction, and that humans would fight with everything they had and use every advantage they could find and never stop adapting and learning and becoming more dangerous. Taeho warned him that the alien reinforcements would arrive soon, and that they had been calling for backup since the first day of the escape, and Wu Jin knew that when those reinforcements arrived, they would find a facility that had been turned into a fortress, and defenders who had learned to use alien technology better than the aliens themselves. Hana had finished her analysis of the quantum communication system and confirmed that she could send a message to human space that would include everything they had learned about alien plans and technology and capabilities, and she could also send a warning about the invasion fleet that was heading toward Earth. The final phase of their resistance was about to begin, and Wu Jin gathered his small team of human fighters and explained that they were not just fighting for their own lives anymore, but for the survival of their entire species, and that every alien they stopped here was one less threat to the people they had left behind on Earth. The aliens had made the mistake of trying to understand human warriors by studying them in laboratory conditions, but real warriors were only revealed in battle, and these creatures were about to learn what humans became when they were fighting for something bigger than themselves, and when they had nothing left to lose. The alien reinforcements arrived in the middle of the night cycle, and Mordan ordered an immediate assault on the control room where the humans had fortified themselves, but the commander had made the same mistake that all the others had made, and assumed that humans would fight like every other species they had conquered. Wu Jin had spent days turning the approach routes into killing fields, and when the first wave of alien soldiers moved through the corridors, they triggered traps that Taeho had built using their own gravity manipulation technology, and the aliens found themselves crushed against walls or floating helplessly in zero-gravity zones while human fighters picked them off one by one. The second wave tried to use their energy weapons to blast through the obstacles, but Ha-Na had rigged the facility's power grid so that any high-energy discharge would feed back through the entire system and cause massive explosions throughout the base, and the aliens realized, too, late, that their own weapons had become liability instead of an advantage. Mordan grew desperate and ordered his troops to begin destroying the facility rather than risk losing more soldiers to human tactics, and this was exactly what Wu Jin had been waiting for, because it proved that the aliens would rather destroy their own research than admit that humans had outsmarted them. Hana activated the quantum communication system and began transmitting everything they had learned to human colonies throughout the galaxy, and the message included detailed scans of alien technology and biological data and tactical information about their weaknesses, and most importantly, a complete database of the invasion fleet's composition and planned targets. The transmission took several hours to complete because of the massive amount of data, but Taeho had rigged the facility's reactor to provide enough power to reach every human settlement within 50 light years and ensure that humanity would not face this threat unprepared and unaware. While the transmission was running, Wu Jin led his team in a series of hit-and-run attacks against the alien forces that were trying to plant explosive charges throughout the facility, and each attack delayed their demolition efforts and gave Hana more time to complete her data upload to human space. The aliens had brought in specialized equipment to deal with human tactics, but they discovered that humans adapted faster than their technology, could be modified, and every time they thought they had found a solution, Wu Jin would change his approach and find new ways to exploit their assumptions and procedures. Tae-ho made a discovery that changed the entire battle when he accessed the alien computer networks and found that this facility was not just a research station but was actually a critical command node for the entire invasion fleet, and that destroying it would leave the alien forces without coordination or communication. The realization that they could cripple the entire invasion gave new energy to the human resistance, and Wu Jin began planning an operation that would not just save their own lives, but would protect Earth and every other human world that the aliens had marked for conquest. But Mordan had also realized the strategic importance of the facility and ordered his remaining forces to defend the command center at all costs, while a separate team continued working to destroy the base before the humans could do any more damage to the invasion plans. The battle became a race against time, with humans trying to take control of the command center while aliens tried to destroy it, and both sides knew that the outcome would determine the fate of billions of people on dozens of worlds throughout human space. Hana finished transmitting the warning and technical data, but discovered that she could do more damage if she could access the command center's main computer and upload a virus that Tae-ho had designed using human programming concepts that alien systems were not designed to handle. The virus would spread through the quantum communication network to every ship in the invasion fleet and corrupt their navigation systems and weapons, targeting and coordination protocols, and turn their own technology against them, just as the humans had done with the facility. Wu Jin fought his way through 3 levels of alien defenses to reach the command center, and each battle proved that human unpredictability was more valuable than alien firepower, because the creatures kept trying to use tactics that had worked against other species but had never been tested against humans. The final confrontation took place in the command center itself, where Morden waited with his personal guard and advanced weapons that had been designed specifically for killing humans based on everything they had learned from their research and testing. But all their research had been conducted on helpless prisoners who could not fight back, and they had never seen what a human warrior could accomplish when he was free to use every skill and instinct that evolution had given him for survival and combat. The battle was brutal and fast, and when it was over, Mordan lay dying on the floor of his own command center while Hana uploaded the virus that would cripple his invasion fleet, and Tae-ho transmitted new coordinates to human military forces that would allow them to intercept the alien ships before they could reach Earth. The facility began to shake as the alien demolition charges finally activated, but the humans had accomplished everything they needed to accomplish, and more, because they had not just escaped from their captors, but had turned their prison into a weapon against their enemies in the final moments before the facility was destroyed. Wu Jin looked at his teammates and realized that they had become something new and dangerous that the galaxy had never seen before, and they had proven that humans were not just another species to be conquered, but were apex predators who had been hiding their true nature. The explosion that destroyed the facility sent a shockwave through space that was detected by human monitoring stations, and within hours, every human world knew that the invasion was coming, but also knew that it could be defeated because 3 humans had turned an alien research facility into a battlefield, and one as their escape pod drifted toward the nearest human outpost. Wu Jin smiled grimly and began planning what he would do when the alien fleet arrived at Earth, because now he knew their weaknesses and their fears, and he knew that humans were going to give them a war unlike anything they had ever imagined. The escape pod was picked up by a human patrol ship 2 days after the facility explosion, and within hours of their rescue, Wu Jin and his team were debriefing military commanders on every major human world, and their story spread like wildfire through the colonies as people realized that 3 humans had defeated an entire alien research facility. Hana's technical data proved invaluable to human engineers, who began immediately modifying their ships and weapons using alien technology, principles they had never understood before, and Teiho's computer virus had infected the alien fleet exactly as planned, leaving hundreds of ships drifting helplessly in space while their crews tried to regain control of their own systems. But the most important thing that came from their escape was not the technology or the tactical intelligence, but the proof that humans could fight aliens and win, and that knowledge changed everything about how humanity prepared for the war that everyone knew was coming. Wu Jin found himself promoted to head of a new special forces unit that was trained specifically for fighting alien enemies, and his first mission was to return to the coordinates where the research facility had been destroyed, because human sensors had detected that other facilities were still operating in that region of space. The assault on the second facility went very differently from his original capture, because this time Wu Jin arrived with a full military force, and ships that had been modified with alien technology, and weapons that had been designed specifically to exploit alien weaknesses that he had discovered during his imprisonment. The aliens had prepared defenses based on their previous experience with human tactics, but they had made the fatal mistake of assuming that humans would use the same approaches that had worked before, instead of adapting and evolving and finding completely new ways to attack. Teiho led the technical assault team that took control of the facility's computer systems within minutes of landing, and Hana commanded the science team that began immediately analyzing every piece of alien technology they could find and cataloging biological samples from dozens of alien species. The human forces moved through the facility like a storm, and the aliens found themselves completely unable to cope with attackers who seemed to know their weaknesses better than they knew them themselves, and who used tactics that no computer model could predict or counter. Within 6 hours, the facility was under complete human control, and the alien prisoners were experiencing what their own test subjects had endured. But Wu Jin made sure that the humans treated their captives with more dignity than the aliens had ever shown to other species. The intelligence gathered from the second facility revealed the locations of 12 more research installations and the coordinates of the main alien fleet, which was still trying to recover from the computer virus and re-establish communications between their ships. Human forces began a systematic campaign to destroy every alien facility they could find, and each victory brought new technology and intelligence that made the next battle easier and more decisive, and within 3 months, the alien research network was completely eliminated. The invasion fleet that had seemed so threatening when Wu Jin was strapped to a laboratory table now found itself hunted by ships that were faster and more maneuverable, and crewed by warriors who had learned to think like their enemies but fight like humans. The first major space battle took place near the outer colonies and lasted only 4 hours because the alien ships had been designed to fight conventional enemies who would try to match them ship for ship in organized formations. But human tactics were based on chaos and unpredictability. Wu Jin commanded one of the boarding parties that captured an alien flagship, and the operation went so smoothly that it seemed almost unfair, because every lesson he had learned in the research facility applied to ship combat, and the aliens had no idea how to respond to enemies who refused to follow any rules. The alien commander of the flagship was the same species as Mordan, and when he saw Wu Jin approaching his command center, he began clicking frantically in what the translation system identified as panic and desperation and surrender, but Wu Jin was not interested in surrender anymore. The war that the aliens had planned to be a quick conquest became a nightmare of human retaliation that spread across dozens of star systems as human forces used captured alien technology to strike at targets that the aliens had thought were completely secure and unreachable. Within a year, the alien empire that had destroyed dozens of civilizations found itself fighting for survival against an enemy that seemed to grow stronger and more dangerous with every battle, and their invasion plans became desperate retreat operations. The final battle took place in the alien home system, where their ruling council had gathered the last of their military forces for one final attempt to stop the human advance. But they had learned nothing from their defeats and still believed that superior technology would overcome human tactics. Wu Jin led the final assault personally, and when he walked into the council chamber where the alien leaders waited, he carried with him a piece of metal from the laboratory table where he had first awakened as their prisoner, and he placed it on their conference table as a reminder of their mistakes. The alien surrender was unconditional and complete and included the release of all surviving members of species that they had captured and enslaved over the centuries, and the sharing of all their scientific knowledge with the civilizations they had wronged. But the most significant outcome of the war was not the defeat of the alien empire, but the transformation of humanity from a species that had been marked for conquest into the galaxy's new dominant military power. Other civilizations that had hidden from the aliens for generations began reaching out to humanity for protection and alliance, and within 5 years, human colonies existed in systems that had been empty space when Wu Jin first woke up on that laboratory table. The research facility where his nightmare had begun was rebuilt as a training center for human special forces, and every soldier who graduated from the program learned the lesson that Wu Jin had taught the galaxy, and that was that humans were never victims unless they chose to be. Wu Jin retired from active duty, but continued teaching at the facility, and whenever new recruits asked him how he had survived his capture and turned the situation to his advantage, he would tell them that the secret was simple and that humans were at their most dangerous when their enemies underestimated them. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity, not because humans were the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced, but because they were the most adaptable and the most determined and the most creative when it came to finding ways to survive and fight and win. Years later, when historians wrote about the war, they called it the Great Reversal because it was the first time in galactic history that a species marked for extinction had instead become the dominant power, and they traced the beginning of human galactic dominance to the moment when one human soldier refused to remain a laboratory specimen.